Yes.
Norway? Yeah. Okay. So good evening, everybody. My name is Barak. Thank you for having the opportunity to share my story here with you. Before we start, you see the presentation?
Yes.
All right, so I want to start with this. This is a slide that I just add to the presentation because yesterday 36 missiles were launched from Gaza Strip to Israel without no reason, no actually reason. The Arabs, the Hamas in Gaza wants, I don't know what, but they want some stuff from Israel. So they decided that yesterday, 3 a.m. in the morning, children, adults, families will run to the shelters because they want to say something for us throughout 36 missiles that launched to Israel. My older brother, he lived over the yellow strip that you see on the slide. This is the Gaza Strip, the left side, the black one. And there are like four strips that you see. The first one is immediately, like the rockets go immediately and hit the ground without even a siren. After it, you have 15 seconds to go to the shelter, 45 seconds and 60 seconds. This is the south of Israel. This is the reality we're facing. And it's very important to open this presentation with this, because yesterday my brother and his wife took the two of their children, one is 1 year and the other one is 3 years old, to the shelters few times at night. I don't really know why, but this is the reality this night in Israel. So now we can start. So I grew up in Ra'anana. It's in the center of Israel. For the last 9 years, I lived in Tel Aviv. And last year, I moved to my new home. This is Kibbutz Palmachim. I have a good view from my home, as you can see. I live on the beach. It's 20 minutes south from Tel Aviv. I assume that all of you know where is Tel Aviv. Maybe some of you even have been in Tel Aviv in Israel. I don't know. But I moved 20 minutes south from Tel Aviv. I live in a kibbutz. It's like a community here in Israel because my wife grew up here. And this is my new hobby. I'm doing SAP because I moved to the kibbutz. So this is the new hobby when I have time, when I'm not in the army. I grew up in Israel, as I told you, and I want to share with you what is Israel for me. So Israel for me is this map. As you can see, Israel is the tiny yellow point in the middle. And if you can see, all the red stuff is all the places around Israel, all the countries which are not democracy, because Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And if we want to understand what it is, so this is like the gay parade in Israel in Tel Aviv. It is the only country in the Middle East that you can be gay and alive at the same time. It is the only country in the Middle East that you can post something against your government and you won't be disappeared at night. You can still live. This is the only tiny country, and this is our tough neighborhood. So Israel is a very small country. You can see Lebanon on the north, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. This is our border. This is our neighborhood, tough neighborhood. And I wanted to give you some feeling about it. So Israel is, you see the numbers with a square kilometer. So Sweden, Norway is something like multiple 20 times even more than Israel. We are a very tiny country. You can cross Israel by car 6 hours from the northern point to the southern point. And it's a very small country, but as you know, Israel have a lot of enemies and a lot of problems throughout our life here in our lovely country. When you ask me what is Israel for me, so this is my grandmother and this is me. I started as a young boy. This is my dear grandmother. She passed away. She's a Holocaust survivor. And when I think about my childhood and what is Israel for me, so this is maybe the most important part of my life that really designed me, designed my personality, my thoughts, my feelings. And I grew up every Wednesday. Both of my grandmothers came to visit us. And that was the first time that I ever met and heard about the Holocaust. When I was a child, it was like a story that I could have believed to. I couldn't understand what this picture my grandmother told me. It was like imagine a story that I couldn't really get into it and to understand how it happened in our world. And when I get adult, I started to understand what really happened. I was born in 1988, but I always said that my life story begins 44 years earlier when my grandmother entered Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp. My grandmother had a normal life, like my life, yours life. This is her at the age of 15, the age of 22. She lived in a small town in Hungary called Felshov. Today it's in Romania. She had friends, she go to school, she was a Jewish, but it wasn't such a big deal. And then in 1944, everything was changed for her. Because in 1944, the Nazis forced my grandmother and her family into the ghetto. They moved to another town. They lived there without food, without money, without a home. And the Jewish community in Hungary, it's called the big tragedy of the Holocaust. Because in 5 months from May 1944, the Nazis decided to vanish all the Jewish community in Hungary, and they killed millions of Hungarian Jewish people in a very, very short period of time. So my grandmother lived in the ghetto, and after that, she moved to Auschwitz-Birkenau. It took 3 days and nights in a cattle wagon, no food, no water, stuff, no fresh air. Everyone was crying, it was dark. It was a long time, more than 70 hours. They got into the train, but it's not a normal train, it was a cattle wagon. They took the train of the cattle and put the Jews into it. Very, very tough. They didn't know what is going to happen to them. They told them that tomorrow on the noon, you need to come with all the family, with a bag, with all that you need, and you are moving to another place. And then they got into the train, this nightmare that I told you. And after 3 days and nights, they got to Auschwitz-Birkenau, this cursed land. They got there at night. And then the Nazis forced the Jews to stand naked, humiliated. They were shouting, pushing, pulling, and aggressively beating. They had the barking dogs. My grandmother was terrified. Her whole family was terrified. And then it was the selection, the famous selection. What happens, and this is a picture that I found of the selection, you can see it on the net, of course, and videos and everything. The Nazis told the Jews to separate to 2 lines. The left line, it's what old women, hard-looking women, like people that are not so, people that are weak, children. And the right line was men and wealthy people that can go to work. They didn't know what to do. My grandmother headed left, following her mother and sisters. She stand with them. At the same day, it was very unique, but Dr. Mengele, the famous Dr. Mengele, that did a lot of, איך אומרים ניסויים בבני אדם?
עוד פעם?
איך אומרים ניסויים בבני אדם?
כאילו murdered?
לא, ניסויים.
To marry?
No. Like, Dr. Mengele took twins, took Jews and make all, like, he put stuff into their body and he wants to see a doctor. So
he did a lot of like injections and operations, a lot of research tests on them.
He did research on the Jewish people. So Dr. Mengele came to do the selection. He saw my grandmother on the left line. He called her, he grabbed her by her collar, and he told her in German, Du bist jung und musst leben und arbeiten, which is, you are young and you must live and work. Rechts, go right. And he took her from her mother and sisters and put her on the other line, on the right line. On the same day, 45 minutes from arrival, and according to the outstanding statistic of the German, my grandmother, father Yitzchak, was killed. Her mother, Rachel, was murdered, and her sisters, Elisheva, Hannah, and Michaela, was murdered as well. All of the day within 45 minutes. And while she's standing on the right line, the Jewish capo, which was the Jewish that the Nazis gave her to be in charge, she told to my grandmother, looked at the chimney, those are your deers. My grandmother, at that moment, she didn't understand. She didn't understand what is going to happen. She didn't understand what is Auschwitz-Birkenau. She didn't understand that at the same moment she's standing, her deers are burning to ashes in the gas chambers and then in the ovens. She didn't understand. My grandmother was a prisoner of Auschwitz-Birkenau. She became less than human. She became a number. She became a prisoner number 12750. She was humiliated, standing naked for hours. The Nazis beat her, eat her, they shaved her hair, and they humiliated her, and she became less than human. These documents, it's a document that 2 months ago, maybe 4 months ago, when my video from Kufa was on the net, one person from Israel that's working in Yad Vashem, which is the museum, he posted me on Facebook and he told me, I saw your speech. I'm searching for your mother documents. So those are the real documents, as you can see. This is my grandmother's name, Ethos, which is Elka. And this is the Nazis' documents. You see the prisoner number 12750. The Nazis were very organized, as you know. And the right document, you can see, this is the document when she was, when she left Auschwitz, when she was after the Holocaust, 22 May 1944. It's the day that she came into Auschwitz. Sorry. I grew up as a grandchild of Holocaust survivor. Those are my roots, and I appreciate them. And I appreciate every moment that I had with my grandmother, every moment that I heard her stories. And I think that what I am today is because of these stories. And from my early childhood, I observed the necessity of Israel as an independent country with the ability to stand and fight for itself. And as you can see on the slide, this is the difference. In 1945, the Jews were kettled by the Nazis without any strength to defend themselves. But today, it's a little bit different. Those Holocaust stories made me waiting to be 18 to go to the army to defend my country. In 2006, I joined the army. I'm now 15 years in the army. I'm major, and this summer, in a few months from today, on August, I will get my next rank and I will become a lieutenant colonel. I'm going to be a battalion commander in this summer. I fulfilled a variety of combat roles, starting as a platoon commander and having worked my way up deputy battalion commander. And this summer, I will be a battalion commander and get my new rank. This is some photos from the Army service, what I can share here. I'm serving in the artillery corps in a special unit, which is a secret unit that have a secret weapon that cannot be, we cannot publish it. So it's one of the secret units of the artillery corps. And I'm taking you fast forward to 2011. At that time, the Arab Spring has occurred. And what happened is that people over Syria, you see the Free Syria, people starting to demonstrate against the regime, against Assad regime. I was a company commander. I was responsible of a portion of the border near Quneitra Pass. I had 100 soldiers. And this area started to be very warm at that time. And one day, it was a normal day, one of my soldiers, 18 years old, 19 years old, very young, he was guarding, and through the binoculars, he saw black vehicles that emerged into Quneitra. into the village. And from these vehicles, had emerged men in dark military garb, which belonged to the ruthless shadow militia, it's called the shadow militia. They were Assad people, and Assad sent them to the village because the village was against the regime. These people are from the same family of Assad, so they are very loyal to Assad. They called Shabicha. You can check it on the net after it. It's very big people with tattoos and white shoes, and it's the most close people to Assad. So the special missions that Assad wanted and needed, he sent these Shabicha, very ruthless people, and these people took the people of Quneitra out of their homes, made them kneel on the street, shoot them in the head. It's very close to the border, so my soldiers could hear the screams of sexual assault, of the shooting, children that ran away, women that ran away. And this soldier is calling me, and all the officers, we see all these sights and sounds in Quneitra Pass. And this visit, so-called visits by so-called Shabicha, they happen once or twice a week on the border next to our point. And then in 2013, I was the company commander. On February 7th of that year, the IDF and the State of Israel decided to open our border gates for the first time and to get the injured Syrian people into Israel because they have no other option. Their regime was killing them, shooting them on the streets. I don't know if you know the numbers, but millions of people were died on this civil war in Syria. And I want to share with you a very short video about what happened. The operation is called Good Neighbor. The first time we opened the border gates and get and collect injured Syrian citizens was in my area when I was a company commander on the Syrian border. So I will put the video, it's very short.
2011, a bloody struggle broke out between the Syrian army and the rebels. Hezbollah, the Iranian army, Jabhat al-Nusra, Islamic State, and other organizations are fighting against each other. In this intense struggle, everyone has his own objective. To date, thousands of Syrians have been killed. Many Syrian citizens have found themselves in the and they want to walk along the wall. These Syrians are all Christians. Some of them have lived in the area since long before the war, while others are displaced reasons who are not deeply organized as a result of the war. Nearly 45 families live in Palestinian constructions. The reality is very complex. In the Golan Heights, there are only 3 hospitals and 4 mental health. There, there's a serious shortage of medical staff. Additionally, the education system has to be formal education for some kids. Most homes don't provide like this. Also, the cost of instead of equality, people worry about what is not good for them. And the battle is only at the last battle. There's a lack of physical capacity. People struggle to survive on a daily basis. The Army, along with the state construction, cherish human life above all. Couldn't stand witnessing the violence and suffering and decided to entitle themselves to the home life. On February 7th, 2015, 7 women troops IDF troops realized that the enemy had hospitals and hospitals. Over time, they treated the burden more seriously. They gave the tool to everyone who was affected. The challenges posed that the treatment was needed at a long time. In February, real therapy pledged 40,000 people. Together with internal organizations and private programs. The ongoing improvement will combine the money as well as improving the network team to support other members of the line, as long as we're able to do so, as long as we have. In March 2011, Alberta struggled
So as you can see, those are some of the pictures that I took in my camera with my soldiers. The picture in the middle is across the border. I put this slide because I want you to understand that the people that came to the border, these Syrian civilians which were injured, were in a very bad situation. And those are some of the pictures that are, I can call them light pictures, because I have a lot of other pictures which are very, very tough to watch them. But people came to the border with very bad injuries, and they have no other place to go. And I want to share with you, as a company commander, I'm like the father of these children, these soldiers, and I'm in charge of them. And the first time when we went to the fence, when we were told that we need to go at night to open the fence and to collect these injured Syrian civilians, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what is going to happen, but I knew one thing. I am in charge of the 30 soldiers that are going with me at night. And I have no clue if the people that will come from the other side will be really injured Syrian civilians, or maybe people that are terrorists and they are acting like people which are injured. And it's a very big responsibility, and it was very confusing the first time. And it became a daily routine, day after day. We went to the fence every night, open the gates and collect people. After it, it became even a day. And when Good Neighbor became very advanced, the IDF even opened an hospital on the fence that collect people, a lot of people every day. If you saw in the movie, they showed on the subtitles that Israel supplies 100 tons of warm clothes and fuel and medical supplies and lots of other things in this operation. If I need to choose one precious moment in my life, I'm 33 years old, but one precious moment that I want to share with you is that at the age of 22, I got a very, very precious opportunity, very special opportunity from the IDF to go back to Poland, to go back to Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp. It's called Witness on Uniform. It's like an obligation of the army, 100 officers that go and do this journey of the Holocaust. Before of this journey, I went to my grandmother. I was 22 years old, not a child anymore. I know the Holocaust. I know my story. And I sat with my grandmother a lot of hours, hearing the story again and again and again, realizing what happened to my family, realizing that my grandmother, watching her sister, she was the oldest child out of 8 brothers and sisters. On the Holocaust, she through all the Holocaust, she was with one of her sisters, younger than her. In one of the camps, after Auschwitz, she moved to another camp. And in this camp, one of the Nazi officers was raping her sister daily. And you know why? He was raping her, and then he was giving her more bread to eat. And my grandmother, she could never forgive herself because she felt as responsible as the older sister. And it was very, very difficult for her to share with me this story. And it was one of the first times she shared this particular story. My father didn't know this story until I told him. And I did a very, very good work with her to know all the background. And when I go to this delegation, I went to Auschwitz. And in Auschwitz, I found my grandmother Barak. It was area A14. I went through the instructions that she gave me. And then I got this picture. It's not a good picture, but it's a very important picture. I had other pictures into the barrack, but this is the barrack that my grandmother was prisoned in. And this is me as a combat soldier in the IDF, the same army she could just dreamed of on the cold nights. She was prisoner number 12750 in this cursed barrack. And when I came back to Israel and gave her this precious gift, she told me, for me, I close the circle. For me, I can go on now because my grandchild is an officer in an army that I could never dreamed of, in a country that I could never dreamed of, defending our country. And we have people that defend our country, and it's not going to be the same again. And this is why we say never again is never again. And this is a very important slide for me, because I don't know if my grandmother, when I was a little child, she know what I will be when I will be older. And every time that I give a lecture and a speech, I hope that she's hearing me from the sky and knowing that I'm cheering her. And this story is very important for me, it designed my life. And now I want to share with you before the Q&A why I'm doing this presentation and speeches and everything. I want to share with you what is going particularly about the Holocaust and about all the organization. I have no problem with organizations that are against something about the diplomacy in Israel, because people can agree with us, cannot agree. People are not living here, maybe they see different things, and I can get all the criticize that people want to give. But one thing I think people are not allowed to do, and I want to show you this movie. Okay. Okay, so this was my presentation. You saw the movie. We don't need to say it's not okay. Probably you understand. And we are open to questions, everything I can answer.
And then one side note about SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, just elaborating a little bit more on that. It's very common in college campuses in North America that these groups coordinate on college campuses, university campuses, and are very anti-Israel in their messaging, as Barak just showed us in the video. Aside from that, feel free to ask some questions for Barak.
Thank you, Barak, for sharing your story. We appreciate it very much. Applause.
Thank you.
And the first question is from my colleague, Gaza, who's a journalist in MIFF.
Shalom, מה שלומך?
אהלן.
Okay. So my question is this. First of all, thank you so much for your lecture. I wish you could be here in Kristiansand in Norway today. Unfortunately, maybe another time. But many countries, including Norway, thinks that the Golan Heights should be is illegal, occupied, and should be returned to the Syrians. What do you think would be the situation today with the Syrian war and everything, if the Golan Heights had still been a part of Syria?
Okay, so I will share with you that this year I'm in college. It's like a war college, like for officers. I'm doing 1 year of college. I'm studying wars. I'm studying all the theory about wars, not only in Israel, all over the world. And this is like a 1 year period of time, like academy before getting lieutenant colonel. So I studied a lot about your question. You know, wars in the past were wars about ground. Armies were beating each other and maneuver one to each other. And the situation was very different from today. I think that today, the future wars won't be the same like the past. Like the next war that we will have with Hezbollah in Lebanon will be a war of a lot of rockets, maybe maneuver into Lebanon, but to kill only terrorists of Hezbollah. And in the end, every side will go to the other side. I think that in the past, the wars, not only in Israel, all over the place, were very, very different. And if you go back to 48, to independence war in Israel, Israel was attacked by 5 different Arab countries, all surround Israel. And these Arab armies wanted to conquer Israel and to take the field of Israel and to throw all the Jews, I don't know where. But they lose the war in a lot of luck from our side because it was a very, very difficult war. And I think in 73, in Yom Kippur War, the Syrians were surprising us. We didn't know that we were going to be a war. And the first maybe 5, 6, maybe 7 days of the war, we lost a lot of field, not only the Golan Heights, but even more west of the Golan Heights. And then we took our land from them and even more. But this was the rules of the wars back then of the days. I think that if today the Syrian will have the Golan Heights, so they will have tactically and strategically, they can, if you know the land, the topography, they will add the place that can watch all Israel until the west side of Israel, because Israel is very narrow. And it was very dangerous for us if they will add the Golan Heights today. And this is the only answer I can give you because I wasn't on those days, and I'm not a politician. I'm an army man. In the end, what the government decide, I'm going to do. I hope that I answered your questions.
Tobias?
Hello, and thank you for your wonderful presentation. I just had a question regarding how the situation for Israel is, since, as you said, the war is today and in the future will be much more complex and a lot more different than what we are used to. How do you view the possibility of a hybrid war where economic means may outwit the ordinary military? Like you can today drive a boycott of Israel and ruin, if you like, their economy without even firing a single bullet. How do you view the disinformation and the new form of warfare, like the hybrid warfare that is ongoing for Israel today? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that boycotting Israel is very dangerous for Israel, but this is not my field. This is the politician field. And I think that we're doing a good job, but it's very, very complex, because it's very complex to understand what is Israel, what is the West Bank, what is the Gaza Strip. Like, it's a very big difference between Gaza Strip and the West Bank. The West Bank is ruling by the Fatah. The Gaza Strip is ruling by the Hamas. There are two different organizations that don't speak with each other and don't agree with each other. One of them is a terror organization, and one of them is not, it's a government. And I think that today, if I want to notice our enemies, our biggest enemies is maybe Hezbollah from the north, from Lebanon, which is connecting to Iran and to the Shia, and Hamas from the Gaza Strip. This is like the biggest two enemies that Israel have today. And, you know, if we go back, you know, today is 2021, let's go back 10 years ago, 2011, when the Arab Spring has occurred. If I will took you maybe 1, 2, 5 years before, and I will tell you, imagine that in 2 years, Assad won't be the president of Syria, and all the Syrian people will go out, demonstrate, and took control of Syria. No one will imagine that it's going to happen. And when it happened in 2011, we saw from the binoculars, you know, 1 kilometer for us, and all the generals and prime minister and everyone came to my position, all the big bosses, to see what is happening. No one was believing that this happened. And, you know, after a few months, Syria has changed dramatically. There was an area controlled by the Syrian army. There was an area controlled by ISIS. There was an area controlled by Jabhat al-Nusra, and another area controlled by the army, the Syrian army, that left the army of Assad and was the opposition army. So Syria divided to many areas, and no one won't understand. And if you go back to history in 73, you know, Israel had a big two enemies. One is the Syrian army, the other one is the Egyptian army. All our wars through the history of Israel from 48 to 73, maybe, yeah, 73, was against Syria and Egypt and Iraq and armies like this. But after 73 and after 82, two big wars that we won, the Arabic armies and countries understand that you can't beat Israel with an army force. Israel is here to stay. We're not going anywhere. We have a very strong army, a very strong nation that believe in the target, that believe in the mission. And they decided to change the strategy, to do a lot of terror attack, to found a terror organization. And if you go fast forward, you know, Assad have a lot of problem inside his country. So the most important thing to him is to get control in Syria, and Israel is very, very far away from him now. We are not interested in him at all. And the strategy map changed dramatically. Lebanon, Hezbollah, with a lot of money funding by Iran, and Hamas from Gaza, those are the big two enemies that the IDF is watching now and Israel is watching now. I don't know, maybe 10 years from today, Assad will solve all his domestic problems and put a lot of money in his army, because his army is very, very weak now. And maybe it will become a new player again. But you know, the Middle East is so
unpredictable.
Unpredictable and surprising. So for now, I don't see Syria in the field. And with Egypt, we have a peace contract. But even Egypt, for example, you know, we have a peace contract with Egypt. But a few years ago, Morsi was the president of Egypt, is from the Muslimic Brotherhood. He wanted to cancel this peace contract because he's a radical Muslim and he's against Israel. But then his chief of staff, chief of staff, he took control and put Morsi in the prison, and now Ahmed Sisi, the general, is the president. So the Middle East, you can't know what is happening. So I can ensure you that today, Syria is out of the game from both of the sides, from us and from them. And our big problems is Hamas for last night, because Hamas in 5-10 years from today will be as Hezbollah. Hezbollah today knows to launch between 4,000, maybe 6,000 rockets a day to Israel. And those rockets won't be on me and my friends. They will be on us as well, but they will be on the population, on the citizens of Israel. The next war with Hezbollah is going to be very, very difficult for both of the sides. That's all. Another question?
Okay, thank you for sharing your story about your family. I've been reading a bit in Ezekiel, the prophet, in the Old Testament, and they say something about how a country from the north will bring a war into Israel, to God's people, and many people think it's Russia. How do you think about Russia today going into Ukraine, having a big military?
I will tell you, I don't know a lot about Russia and Ukraine. I read about it, but not so much. I don't understand a lot about this war. My answer to you is going to be that for us, we know that at the age of 18, every man and women must go to the army, because now this is our duty to give 3 years, maybe 2 years. It depends if you're a man or woman, to defend your country. And some of us, like me and like others, decided to extend their service to become officers. And then you have a few stops that you can extend, like taking as a career. But I think that today, our soldiers are the best of Israel. It's like the best men you can ever imagine. We are investing a lot of money and time in education. We're the only army in the world that have youth and education corps. Every Sunday, if you go into Israel, you see soldiers, group of soldiers, platoons, and more, going to places towards Israel, which are connected to education plan that they have in the unit, to learn about the history, to learn about our roots, and about values, which are not connected to the history, but about the values. Because we want these soldiers to be a better person. Because, you know, if all of the youth of Israel are coming into our army, it's obligation, everyone must come. So we have them for 3 years, and then we give them back to the society. So it's our mission to take these wonderful children and to give them back to the society, even better children with a lot of other values, such as helping, you know, weak communities. We go to do a lot of stuff with weak communities. We go to Holocaust survivors. We teach them about everything. So what I want to say, I don't know if the threat will come from the north in the figure of Hezbollah, in the figure of Iran, in the figure of Hezbollah, which are funded from Iran with the soldiers from Iran, or other Shia militia that they will send for them. I don't know if it will be Russia. I don't know if it will be Assad in 10 years that will have the strength. I don't know if it will be another general that will take control in Egypt and come from the south. I have no clue, but I know that we have the best army, one of the best army in the world. And I know that we have maybe one of the youngest army, like this, our soldiers are very, very young, but they have a lot of spirit, and I am ensured that they will defend their country no matter what. So I'm not really afraid from the threats that will come from the north or from other side, but I want to tell you, and it's very important to tell you, that war is chaotic, war is difficult, war is not fun. I took part in 2 operations in Gaza. It's not a fun part, and you just want it to end all the time, but you know that you're doing the right thing to do. And you know that when you go to the front, your family back there, and you need to keep them, because now it's my shift. And I think that every Israeli youth and every Israeli soldier know that if it happened in his shift, you need to do everything, because in 10 years, it will be someone else shift, and it will be as a citizen in the country.
Er det flere spørsmål? Ingen? Nei? Blir det middag? Nei. Okay, thank you very much, Barak. There are no more questions for you. So we thank you for your presentation. And we have actually invited Eyal Dror to Norway in June, but you never know these days, you know, with the relations. But and he actually took me to the Golan Heights last year to show me some of those places on the Golan Heights where this Operation Good Neighbor took place. So it's a real honor to know him, because he's such an excellent guy. Anyway, thank you very much, and we appreciate it, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you for listening, and be safe with the coronavirus and everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a good day.